but I do think the Eagles now look at Jalen Hurts as a bridge quarterback. He is not the future of this team at the quarterback position.
The Birds 365 on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel with Jody Mack and John McMullen. Joe Krause sitting in for Jody Mack today. John McMullen is right back to work down in South Philadelphia at the NovaCare Complex. I'll be manning the ship for the next 2 hours. And wow, do we have a great lineup of experts for analysis, opinion, and all kinds of conversation. Of course, John McMullen will kick us off this morning, and we'll bring John into the conversation in just a moment. Barrett Brooks will be along at 8:30. We'll do a deep dive on Fletcher Cox with Barrett Brooks. Mark Farzetta will join us at the top of the hour to begin the second hour of Birds 365. And then wrapping it up, taking us home, Derek Gunn and Rob Ellis will join us. Great show lined up. Johnny Mack, welcome in, my friend. Great to be speaking with you on a Wednesday morning.
Yeah, I'm quite the leadoff hitter today. That's a big lineup. That's a credit to you, Joe Krause.
Yeah, it should be a good show, Johnny Mack. And as we said in the pre-show, as we were getting ready to come on the air and welcome everybody in to Birds 365, I've got big shoes to fill between Jody Mack and John McMullen. When you put those two shoe sizes together, I've got some good shoes or some big shoes to fill. But glad to be here, glad to get started, and great to be here on a Wednesday coming off of a win. And I say, and I believe in the National Football League, I don't care who it is, a win is a win is a win. Let's look ahead to the next opponent.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I don't think, and I say this all the time, it's not college football where there are games you can check on the schedule and say, oh, okay, if I'm an Alabama fan like Xander Krause and an alum, Alabama's going to win certain games. In the NFL, anybody can beat anybody. Now, the lines are as close as it is to being the worst team in the league. I guess you can argue Houston as well. But even those two teams, they were on the crux, the lines of beating the Baltimore Ravens, who are a very, very good football team, and needed a 66-yard field goal from Justin Tucker to beat them. They nearly beat Minnesota, which some people believe is in the mix for that number 7 seed in the playoffs. So they're not terrible. So they've been in a lot of games. And I said, you got to give the credit to the Eagles to go out there on a business trip and handle that business in an emphatic way. I think they deserve a lot of credit for that. And I think it's fair to put the context on it, just as we did, and Jody and I have been doing it from the start of this, that the front portion of this schedule was really, really difficult for the Eagles. And the back portion isn't as difficult. And it started with the Lions. Now you have a little bit of a respite. The Chargers are a good team, but they're coming east. You got to go out to Denver, who's an average team, not great. And then you get into the NFC East, which outside of Dallas, the Giants are struggling. The Washington football team is struggling. So this is the easier portion of the Eagles' schedule. And it's not their fault the Lions were the bowling pin on the schedule. All they can do is take advantage of it, and they did.
Johnny Mack, before we get into the game on Sunday, I do want to get everybody up to speed. Perhaps many of the loyal Birds 365 viewers and watchers who tune into the show on a daily basis. NFL draft deadline. We talked a little bit about it last night on Football 24/7. The Eagles made one last move, their third move before the draft deadline. And we've reached a point in Philadelphia, I think, where it's open tryouts for cornerbacks. As the Eagles made one last move yesterday, I don't know if there's any significance to it at all other than they made a trade.
Yeah, I don't know if there's much significance short term. I think you're right. I mean, if you look at cornerback as a whole, it's been one of the best positions, really, for the Eagles in what is essentially the first half of the season. Obviously, it's not a sharp cutoff point now that we have 17 games, but through 8 games, Darius Slay has played very well. Steve Nelson has proven to be a very prudent signing, late signing, and is as solid as a cornerback two as you have in this league. To be honest, that's the way he's been playing. And Avonte Maddox is having a career year. In the best year he can do it because he's in a contract year. So I think from the Eagles' perspective, two things here. One, if you go back to Jonathan Gannon a couple of weeks ago saying we're not a dime team right now, which he got a lot of criticism for, was an indication that he's not confident with the backup corners. And there's a lot of youth and a lot of unproven players. So what Howie Roseman seems to be doing is collecting darts. And as I always say, the more darts you have, the better chance you have to hit the bullseye. Even if it's just one, you get lucky. And he's got a lot of young corners, and he's brought in a lot of young corners. It started with Mac McCain on waivers. They traded Zach Ertz, and they got back Tay Gowan. And now you have another cornerback. You have Josiah Scott. And now you have Kerry Vincent Jr., who they picked up. All very young corners, most of them rookies. Josiah Scott's in his second year. So, maybe one of them hits. I do think you got to be realistic. And, Steve Nelson is playing well enough to where he can go back on the free agent market next year and probably get a pretty significant contract. That may not be here. You're going to have to pay Avonte Maddox. So you have to have, this trade's more about 2022 and moving forward than right now.
Johnny Mack, I wanted to ask you what the method to the madness is right now for this football team. You've talked ad nausea about 2021 being the season that this football team is going to make the determination as to whether or not Jalen Hurts is the quarterback of the future. Whether or not that decision's already been made or not, perhaps it is, perhaps it's not. Maybe you have an opinion, maybe you have a thought or an opinion on that part of it. But where is this team trying to go? I know where they want to get to. I get that. That's an obvious. But what are they trying to do with this new coaching staff in terms of building a roster that works with the beliefs of Nick Sirianni and Jonathan Gannon, and throw Shane Steichen into the mix, I guess, because he's the offensive coordinator, or at least he has the title?
Yeah, I think there is. It's always a process, and they're in the midst of the process. You can't make a significant change like the Eagles did with the coaching staff and blowing one coaching staff out and bringing a new one in with a couple holdovers, Jeff Stoutland, Aaron Moorhead. But the vast majority are obviously new coaches and have new philosophies and look at things a little bit different than the previous regime. And you can't, in one off season, in one fell swoop, you can't bring in everybody that the new coaching staff would like, or have players that fit what they want to run. So it's always that sort of process. The interesting thing to me, the bigger disconnect is from the front office. So Howie Roseman, the personnel department, and the coaching staff. When you're in this sort of transitional period, and I use that phrase because Jeffrey Lurie used it. When you're a contender like the Los Angeles Rams, and I'll use them because they just picked up Von Miller. Everybody's on the same page. Everybody understands what the goal is. Everybody understands it's Super Bowl or bust. Everybody's all in. Everybody's fighting for that same goal. When you're in that transition, rebuilding, whatever you want to call it, phase, in a lot of ways, the coaching staff has a different goal than the personnel in the front office staff. The latter is thinking more about the future, and that's why you have trades like Terry Vincent, and you bring in a young corner like Tay Gowan, and you start thinking about the future. And the coaches are trying to win on Sunday. They're always trying to win on Sunday or the next game day, if it's Thursday or Monday, for the sticklers out there like Jody McDonald. You're always fighting to win that game. And I thought the most interesting statement that Nick Sirianni made after the Lions game was, we were doing what was best to win the game. And it was a heavy run supported game, 46 times on the ground. We talked about it. They only threw it 14 times. So from a larger perspective, you say, okay, what the heck did you learn about Jalen Hurts in that game? Not much. I mean, people say, well, he ran the football. We already knew that. We know that. He can do that. There's no question he can do that. The other stuff is what you're supposed to be trying to learn. Maybe that answers your question, Krause, a long roundabout way of saying maybe the Eagles have already made their decision.
Yeah, that's my thought, Johnny Mac, in terms of, you kind of already, I think, and maybe not. Just life in general. Whether you're the CEO of a company, whether you're the vice president of pharmaceutical sales for Merck or J&J, you kind of know what you have in an employee, or in this case, a quarterback, once you have some sort of a snapshot to evaluate. Now, I don't want to sell Jalen short by any stretch, but you now do have at least a body of work. And if you remove the 4 games from the 2020 season and just compartmentalize the first 8 games of the 2021 season, is it enough, in your opinion, to know what you have?
I think it is. I think if you push me, and I've said this for about a week or two, I think the Eagles have understood and made their decision, and their decision is going to go in a different direction at that position for 2022, whatever that means. Now, that decision hasn't been made. Whether they'll try to go after a veteran quarterback, or whether they use their significant draft capital to draft the next, what they believe is a franchise quarterback. I think that's the direction they're headed in. I think it's abundantly clear by the way they're playing. They're just trying to get through this season to win as many football games as possible. Now, this is from the coaching staff's perspective. And do whatever they can to win a particular football game on a particular game day by hook or by crook. The quarterback's got to run the ball. we got to run it 46 times, if we got to protect the quarterback from throwing the ball, whatever you have to do to win that football game. Now, the front office, again, this is what I bring up. They have a little bit of a different uh, view of things. And from their goal, it's all right, how do we get that quarterback? How do we get the next guy? And this is where we get into the Sixers nonsense and tanking and things like that. It is easier to get a quarterback, and that quarterback, and by the way, it's not just the draft. Again, it's on the trade market as well. It's easier to get a quarterback to hire your draft picks are. Just unfortunately, you're trying to serve two masters at once, and sometimes you can't do that.
Well, we've been down the road of the next great quarterback when Carson Wentz was drafted, and Carson was going to be the franchise quarterback, and we were going to dig in and enjoy the ride and have a long journey with Carson Wentz. I've heard you say it many times, only because it happens. You don't have to look past the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to see it. You can change your fortunes quickly by bringing in and trading or getting a franchise quarterback like in Aaron Rodgers, in Tampa Bay's case, of course, Tom Brady. So if you have draft capital and Aaron Rodgers is there, are you better slinging for Aaron Rodgers, or are you better for taking a chance on who you profess to be the next franchise quarterback?
I think in this age of the NFL, I think you're better going after the proven guy if you can get him. Now that's as you mentioned, Tom Brady being the best example of this. The guy's 44 years old. Aaron Rodgers is in his late 30s. He's still, look at what Green Bay's doing despite all their issues. Russell Wilson got injured, so Seattle's having a little bit of a down season, but the Eagles have loved him since he came out in the draft. Now, the problem is Aaron doesn't want to play here. He wants to be, closer to the West Coast. Russell, remember this offseason, put together a list of cities he would go to because he was thinking about moving on from Seattle. Philadelphia was not on it. So it's got to take two to tango. But if you're asking me which way I would go, yeah, I mean, if you put Aaron Rodgers on this particular team, this team right now, the Philadelphia Eagles, they're 7-1, at worst 6-2. That's the difference. That's how drastic the difference is. Right now, they're a Super Bowl contender. Today, when we talk about all the issues and all the defensive problems and no linebackers and no depth at cornerback and no depth at running back and all the stuff we've talked about, all the offensive line issues because of injuries and shuffling and personal issues, right now, they are a Super Bowl contender with that one particular player. And that's the difference a superstar quarterback can make.
Wow. Based on that, I'm suggesting to Howie Roseman, who's not even who's not going to listen, but all that great draft capital that you have, whatever it takes to make that happen, to me, would seem to be the priority, because I don't see a long roadmap to that destination. I just don't see it. I don't see the longevity or the timeline allowing a team to assemble enough pieces to finally get to the point where you can make that statement and then actually go out and do it, without a franchise QB. That's an obvious. I get it.
Well, you can't, but I mean, the goal for everybody is to get that franchise QB. The goal, is Patrick Mahomes to get him in the draft, and he's young, and you have him for hopefully 15, 20 years, whatever it is. That's the best case scenario. It's also much more difficult. Um, generally, if you're going to take a quarterback near the top of the draft, you're going to have a learning curve. So you're pushing your window back a couple of years to begin with. That's never easy to do in Philadelphia. You see the drastic changes in the fan base from week to week. There's such passion for this team. When they lose, it's Chicken Little. The sky is falling. When they win, why can't you do this every week? Why can't you win 44-6 every week? There's this almost heart attack EKG and it's tough to be patient in this town. Chicago is the same way. They're going through it with Justin Fields right now. Do you want to go through that pain? The Eagles do, I think. They want to get the quarterback. They thought they had that in Carson Wentz. And unfortunately, and people look at Carson Wentz and they say, well, ultimately he was a failure. And I say, was he? You got a Lombardi trophy. You didn't have one before he got here. And he was a big part of that for people who don't think he was. Without Carson Wentz, you don't have the number one seed. You're not in a position to beat Atlanta. You're not in a position to beat Minnesota to go to the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. Now, it didn't last nearly as long as people had hoped because of the injuries and all the issues that we all know. But ultimately, you get that Lombardi trophy and you got to say, all right, that's a check mark in the column. Now, how do you get back to that situation? The easiest way is the veteran. The more difficult way, but the more long-lasting way is if you get it right in the draft. And Kenny Pickett seems to be the guy that NFL scouts are centering on, the quarterback from Pittsburgh. The Eagles will be in a position, but it's always about evaluation. When they evaluate that particular player, did they like him as much as other people? These are the questions you're going to ask. But the questions, we're having this long conversation about this position. I don't think Jalen Hurts is going to be in that conversation. Now, he might be for 2022, but only as a bridge to 2023. In other words, you're not going to be able to get Aaron Rodgers. It's unlikely you're going to be able to get Russell Wilson. If you don't like Kenny Pickett, maybe you kick the can down the road another year. But I do think the Eagles now look at Jalen Hurts as a bridge quarterback. He is not the future of this team at the quarterback position.
Birds 365 with John McMullen and Jody Mack. Joe Krause sitting in here on a Wednesday morning. John, you also have to have the coaching staff that can, or the philosophy that can develop the draft pick, the next great quarterback. The Chargers, who were going to play on Sunday, have, with their gunslinger, who had a great year one, has ties to the current offensive coordinator on this football team. Now, I don't know how involved Shane Steichen was with Justin Herbert. I don't know how involved I don't know how involved he is with Jalen Hurts, but the process requires or demands that the coaching staff mold the talent. That's what Andy Reid did with Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, I mean, there's, I always talk about the draft and people assuming, okay, you draft a player and you get a finished product. It doesn't work that way. And you don't even have to go to Patrick Mahomes. You can go back to this city in 1999 and Donovan McNabb. And if you think about that draft and some of the top tier quarterbacks who never lived up to their billing, whether it was Tim Couch going to Cleveland or wherever. I think Achilles Smith was in that draft. You start to think, well, what if they got to Philadelphia with Andy Reid and vice versa? And Donovan McNabb went to Cleveland. That's a butterfly effect that is significant in each of their careers. So, yeah, I mean, you do not get a finished product when you draft any player. And player development is one of the most important parts, arguably the most important part of the coaching staff. And certainly at the quarterback position, it's even more important. But yeah, I mean, Shane Steichen had a huge impact on Justin Herbert. He was the play caller out there. He, at points, and he was a big part of that quick development for a guy who looks like he's going to be a star in this league. So there's two things. I mean, and Nick Sirianni's already talked about, his time in San Diego with the Chargers and a little bit of Los Angeles and Shane as well. And they always talk about Phillip Rivers as a veteran quarterback and just, how gifted he was, how smart he was. Another coach, essentially, on the staff, per Shane Steichen. So you get these two dichotomies when you have the quarterback. It's what we were just talking about. If we have like a Tom Brady or an Aaron Rodgers, well, they run the show. That's what you want to get to, man. When you got an extension of the coaching staff on the field, that's what you want to get to. But it's really difficult to get to that point, and especially with young quarterbacks. And that's where it's so important that you have to develop them, not only from people talk about the traits, but the other part of it, the mental processing and the mental aspect is far, far bigger. And that's always difficult, obviously, with younger quarterbacks who come in from a new era in college football where they're not asked to do a lot. They're just not. It's a lot of, and you see it with Jalen Hurts. It's a lot of one read and go. So you have a conundrum as an NFL coach, as an NFL offensive coach, and saying, are we going to put together game plans that accentuate what this young quarterback can do right now? Or are we going to teach him to be a Tom Brady, a Peyton Manning, a Phillip Rivers, an Aaron Rodgers? The latter takes a long, long time. It's a multi-year process.
Birds 365, Johnny Mack checking in from down in South Philadelphia. We'll see Johnny Mack tonight on Football 24/7 as the team goes back to work in preparation for the Chargers game on Sunday. Johnny Mack, nice to sit in your chair on this side of the aisle on this Wednesday morning. Appreciate it, man. We'll talk to you later on, brother.
All right. Thanks, Krause. I appreciate it.
All right, good stuff from Johnny Mack here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. We'll take our first commercial break on Birds 365. On the other side of the break, Barrett Brooks. Back in a moment.